I think we are live.
Cool. I'm just, I still have a few things up. I'm trying to jump into a few races, but I'll be present regardless.
And we go there.
So yeah, like you were saying, it's just a lot of big news today.
Yeah. Well, all week, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't even look at the NASCAR announcement.
Oh, I forgot to post it in our group.
I think somebody else pulled it in.
I don't think so. That's another stream.
What's that?
All right, there we go. All right, I just posted it. So I don't know, do any of these updates really excite you? From the perspective of the future of ZED or how you approach the game? Hey, Cox, what's up?
Not until we see more, right? I think there's a lot that still needs to be unpacked. I think, we need to learn more about fatigue. I think we need to learn more about a lot, basically every piece of this. I think the zero win and the maiden races and the 5% races are an interesting development, and we'll see how those are actually implemented, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, implementation is probably going to be one of the biggest things, right? I don't know. I feel like I have enough faith in ZED at this point that they're going to work at least hard at making sure that it's workable. And I mean, I know that they said that they're going to be developing this new tool to kind of replace the odds, and that the quote unquote flames are just a temporary fix.
Yeah.
Or I guess a holdover until they have their new metric ready, I guess.
I'm not as down on the flames as some people are. We kind of talked about that before. I mean, it's I think that if you're looking at it as a comparison to odds, the top 3 odds horses are generally, the most likely winners, right? Very rarely does a horse outside of the top 3 odds win. And so if you're highlighting those horses and you start to compile head-to-head data that way, I think that's something. You obviously don't know the magnitude of your favoritism. So you can't say, oh, I'm pulling 4 odds, I'm really good. I think it's more of a relative measure. But if you enter 10 races and don't have any flames, then you're starting to probably see that you're not going to have a super strong horse. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I'm not me doing away with the odds and then replacing with the flames. Like you're saying, since we have all that historical data on odds, you're basically going to get a good idea of how strong your horse is if it's pulling flames against strong horses. And if it's not, then you kind of have a good idea that it's not strong. And that's why I was recommending to people to go to the data dump that CryptoG does. I think he updates it daily. I don't know if he does or not, but just in case, some of the sites like Know Your Horses or Haku end up, I don't know why ZED would ask them to take down any historical odds, but in the off chance that it does get scrubbed, I would have at least one of those files saved somewhere so that you could derive the historical odds of whatever horses you're going against. And, you know, this all comes back to, you know, race management for me. Because one of the most important parts of race management and racing your horse properly, in my opinion, is knowing the field that you're racing against and knowing which horses are strong in the distance that you want to race and which ones are not. Because if you already know that information, then there are ways to mitigate, say, not being able to see their fatigue bar, or, you know, not having odds data, but knowing how strong those horses are relative to other horses and whether or not you pull flames against them and stuff like that can kind of at least give you a general overview of how strong of a horse you have. So in that sense, I think that, like, I think part of the idea of why they're doing this is just to make it harder to play the discovery game, right? And to me, like, I know that some people were saying, oh, this takes skill out of the game and it's more about luck or just like randomly throwing your horse in and stuff. But to me, that's like the complete opposite of what it's done, because to me, this places a much larger emphasis on your analytical abilities and like how much research you're willing to do and how, you know, up to date you are on the racing fields. So those are all different skills that you need to like keep up to date on and be strong in order to be successful. Like, I mean, obviously, unless you just like luck in or buy into a monster horse that's just strong against everyone anyway. But for most people, like that deep analysis can make a world of difference in how well your horse races.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of these changes,
change the importance of that.
Yeah, exactly. So JJ Buster.
Yeah, so I guess we've got a few people watching.
Cool.
I figure let's go ahead and jump into the plan programming for tonight. And
programming.
As you know, people filter in. You know, anybody.
How many people do we have? I can't actually see through the StreamYard link.
Looks like we've got 6.
Right.
6 or 7. Yeah. So, but yeah, you know, anybody watching, feel free to kind of speak up, ask questions. We want to focus most of our time tonight on, you know, all the updates that came out yesterday and some of the reactions to them, kind of talk through things live. I think we've all had some chance in my blood. We've all had some chance to kind of process and think, but obviously there's still a lot that we just don't know. So we were planning on taking some time to tick through each of these and give our thoughts. You know, I don't know how many of you guys watched the Pony Plug stream earlier this week. You know, Zook kind of did something similar. And I think we'll have some overlapping conversation, but I think CJ and I view things a little bit differently than some people. And we also definitely have our own opinions on a lot of things. So, you know, hopefully we'll kind of cover everything in some good detail here. So, just jumping right in, you know, the first thing is more 250 races. I don't think this changes a lot. Hopefully it'll be easier to get into 250s with worse horses, especially, you know, ones that we haven't necessarily been able to test as much, or newer horses that we'd like to kind of see them against weaker competition. You know, I think the bigger issue here is still the racing schedule and the generation of race distances that people want to race. But, you know, anytime there are more races available, especially quickly, you know, in the quickly filling races, I think it's a good thing. What do you think, CJ?
Yeah, no, I would say the same. I think having more available is good. I think that it means that the competition will be a little bit more spread out as well. I think, like you're saying, the race generation is the real issue, because like sometimes you'll have, you know, what feels like 15 2,000-meter races pop out at the same time, and then you don't see 1,000-meter race for what feels like an hour or more,
or 6 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I think the statistic is that, is it class 4 or class 3 that's never had
class 4
2,600? That's never had a 2,600 race ever. So it's like, I think what I had originally thought might be a good idea to do is just have, basically, at the 250 level, always have
one
a race available at each distance, so that, like, almost like the Griffins. So like as soon as it goes, another one pops in. And then with the $5 to $10 to $15 ones, you would have those rotating on like a timed schedule or whatever. Not necessarily a schedule, but just like randomly generated.
Yeah.
So that way I feel like it benefits the, say, lower tier horses a little bit more, because they don't have to kind of wait for and try and like smash their buttons to get into a 250 that suits them. But then you always have those races available. The only real kind of like downside I see to that is for horses that, say, use a specific distance to declass and to drop points, would, I guess, kind of always have those races available and easy to get into. I don't know.
A lot of those horses aren't as consistent at the 250 level, though. They're either winning some or they're finishing in the middle some. I mean, they're less. I've found with a couple where I have kind of consistent distances that they're less consistent at the 250 level. Even Groot actually loses, has a worse record at 250 than at $5. So,
and that makes sense.
You know, point made. Like, if you're looking to run a bunch of down races, then, you know, having a 250 available for each distance will make that easier. I think on the flip side of that is fatigue, right? So, but we'll have to see how that's implemented. But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Did you have anything else on the 250s?
No, I don't think so. I think the 250s are so Cox, for to sandbag. I don't view it as sandbagging, right? Like if you're, as long as you're doing it in class, like, I mean, even up class, the issue that I have with people, or not with people, but with the idea of sandbagging, is that, like, the higher you move up in class, the less likely most horses are to actually benefit from running in their down distance, right? Like people talk about weak horses, or horses that are not class 1 material, jumping into class 1 to try and lose. But that's actually, like, you know, that's a negative ROI venture, because your odds usually will jump by going up so high and against like much stronger competition. And as we all know, the higher your odds are, the more likely you are to finish in the middle, right? So you still want to have like a certain threshold of odds. I think the average odds for finishing in 12th position is 10. So I think the further you go up, like, the kind of more you like shift to the middle more consistently. So in terms of whether I recommend running $5 to sandbag, hey, hot mannequin. No, I mean, it depends on the horse. It really does. Yeah. A lot of horses, depending on their strength, like if they're so strong, like I actually am having this problem right now with one of my horses, where he's so strong that when I throw him in $2.50 2400s, he ends up like pulling the best odds in the race, and he wins more than he should. Even though he's a spike horse sprinter, he's winning these 2400s because he's just he's just that strong. So I'd say it's more of a discovery thing for you individually. Like David was saying, he had a horse that she wouldn't really lose that well at 2,400 in 250 races, but $5, it was basically like an automatic down. So each horse is different. I see horses like Princess of Power and LBJ Goat, stuff like that. They'll go into like $10 and $15 down distances because I imagine it's just because they're so strong. And also because, you know, even though it's a down distance, you're still going to win some of those races, right? So, you know, I would much rather like fluke into a win at you know, $5 or $15 than in a 250 race. Right. Now again, like I was saying, it's just a matter of you knowing your horse and how strong it is relative to the field that it's running against. You almost kind of want to hit that. Yeah. So it's still really important. We could probably pull it up later. How often does ZED drop horses? We could probably pull up the chart later. We got a guy that we're pretty close with, BG, who pulls a lot of data, and he has a nice chart that shows the average odds by finishing position.
I've got it.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, so you can see here the average odds for first place. I think it's 9, and then the average odds for last place is 10. And then it just kind of like goes on a bit of a curve. The higher your odds get, the more likely you are to finish in the middle. Yeah. So I think part of that problem, Kavix, is that likely if you're going into free class 1 races, even though the competition level is typically a little bit lower in free races, class 1 races still kind of pull a lot of strong horses that are trying to do the same thing that you are. So my recommendation would be to figure out how strong your horse is and run it in fields where it's still a strong runner, but it's getting more in the like 9 to 11 odds range on your down distance, and that'll improve your success a lot. So whether that's $250 races, $5 races, I think we're getting a little bit away from what we were talking about, but just that would be my recommendation. I don't know if David agrees or not.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, it's totally horse dependent. We've debated this before, but I don't want to go down this path outside of saying I'm not convinced that free races work like paid races do from a down distance and race management standpoint. But I think that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother stream.
So I don't know how many new people are in the chat, but just so that people are kind of aware of the direction that we're going tonight. No, not at all. That's kind of like, here's the thing with our stream is that we kind of have like our plan, but the interaction with the community is really important for us because largely we are an educational stream. So the idea is, yeah, exactly. I have ADD. So, you know, the idea is that if you have a good question, we'll address it. And we'll try and give you the best information that we can without detracting too much from the original content. Hey guys.
Hey guys. Hey T Sizzle. One question I want to make sure we don't miss. Hot Mannequin, you asked how often does ZED drop horses? For a little while they were targeting. They actually had, I think, 3 drops in March, and then they were targeting 1 drop a month. But the drop in June did not really go how they intended it to. And so they've kind of refocused on breeding, opening up breeding, which happened a few weeks after that. And then really revamping racing, which is kind of what we're talking through today. So to answer your question, I've actually been pestering some of the Discord managers about the next drop, and they are very tight-lipped, even more tight-lipped than usual. So we really don't have an idea. I think there's still something like 10,000 Genesis horses still available, maybe a little bit more than that. Most of those are, Finnies and Buterins. Yeah,
there's not a lot of
IRZs.
There's actually not a lot of Nax and Savos left, right?
There are about 50 of each, I think.
50 of each left? Wow.
Yeah, Z1 through Z4. Yeah, Comics. I thought they might try to get one in, before Labor Day in the States, which is the first weekend of September. But outside of a couple of issues with breeding that I think we've all had around fees and a few things that they've done a great job fixing, it's clear that they've spent a lot of time and resources working on breeding. So,
so I'll just okay. I'm gonna get to these two questions, and then we're gonna get back to just really quickly, like getting to the plan of the stream. For a beginner, the best way to acquire a horse, that would be by going to this stream and winning our giveaway. No, the actual best way would be to, in my opinion, get in contact with someone in the community, talk to them, talk to like a bunch of people, like let them know what you're interested in as far as that goes. Like if you really want to be a racer, if you really are interested in the breeding aspect, find out as much about the game and really kind of immerse yourself in ZED before making a decision on what kind of horse you want to buy. And then there's two options. You can either wait for a drop, or I guess more than two options, but the main two options would be waiting for a drop where you'll get the cheapest prices because you're selling at stock. And then the other one would be to buy off of OpenSea. OpenSea, actually you can use, there are better market tools, but I'll just say OpenSea is where the actual market is. You can find really good deals on there if you do a lot of research, right? So my recommendation would just be to, before you even think about buying a horse, do as much research as possible, unless you're not taking it seriously and all you want to do is just, kind of gamble once in a while and like throw a horse into a race. At that point, I don't know that it really matters too much how you approach it. But if you really want to be someone that plays a lot of ZED and you look at it as a long-term time investment, I would really just do a lot of research. You can reach out to us. We're always happy to help new players. And what I was getting at before is that our main topic for the stream tonight is we're going to go through the update and kind of discuss how we feel about it. And then the second part is going to be, we're going to show the horse that we're giving away. We're going to go over it, kind of mention how strong we feel it is, where it would be best raced, and how best to approach racing as a new player. New players that are here that don't have a horse in their stable, I would like you to reach out to me on Twitter or on Discord. Let me know how interested you are in ZED, why you want the horse, and just kind of like give me a general overview of like how you feel about ZED in general, because David and I are both like pretty big community guys. I will always pay it forward to the community. I'll always help new players if I can, and so will David. So for me, if you want this like free horse, all you have to do is show me a little bit of effort and show me that you're willing to put a little bit into the community, and I have no problems giving it to you. So, and that applies to anyone that is interested in the free horse. And it's not a bad horse. We'll take a look at it later. The other question was, when you say Spike Sprinter, do you want to field this one, David?
Yeah. Do you want to drop your socials into chat? We don't have a command queued up or anything like that, or?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So this next question, I'll do that, and then CJ might have something to add. But so for me,
so I will.
One example is a horse some of you may know, Poodle to the Moon, who's probably the third or fourth best sprinter in the game. If you look at Poodle's odds by distance, and this is the Know Your Horses site that a lot of you are probably familiar with. But as far as looking at kind of stats by distances and specific races, and kind of digging in with different filters, I think CJ and I both use this tool more than most. And I'll pull up another one that shows something similar that I I like and I think is being revamped or kind of improved upon from what it's been the last couple months. But when we say sprint spiker, you can see that you have lower odds in the sprint distances, all the way down to 5.88 average odds in 1,000. And then you have this spike up at 1,600. So as strong as this horse is at 1,000 and 1,200, his average odds, and yeah, it's not very many races, but his average odds are still over 20 at 1,600. And then you can see the further you get away from 1,600, the better Poodle's odds become. So that whenever we talk about spikers, this is the type of chart that is most common, and it's this big spike at 1,600. So another site that's great, where you can see it as well, and I'll pull up CJ. I'll pull up Sigma for a second, and then we can get back to the. So Sigma for a while was the best site out there in my mind as far as looking at kind of race analysis across classes and distances. I know that the guys who started the site have been working on it to kind of revamp it and pull in some of the odds.
Yeah, they're all pulled in and updated now. You can get them anytime you download.
So another example.
Hey, Fogel, what's up, man?
Hey, Fogel. An old school spiker is Gun for Hire. And this is a long distance spiker. So you can see this chart in the middle here is average odds, and it's a heat chart, right? So green is good, red is bad. And you can see the same shape up here on the histogram chart. So at 1,600, he has a huge, hey Oxy, you have a huge spike at all the way up to 40 plus odds in some cases. And then at 2,600 here, you're seeing 4.2 average odds. So this is another type of spiker profile. So I think that kind of answers your question. And we'll talk a little bit more about race shapes and race management kind of on the back half of the cast when we're talking about the horse that we're giving away.
Yeah, if I could just cut in and just say,
yeah,
Kavix and Aquila, when you're looking at a spike horse, basically the best way to look at it is that they are either long or short distance specialists. So they do really well typically on one end of the spectrum, and then they do typically really poorly on the other end in terms of race. Well, poorly depending on how you look at it, right? Like people like to lose. So typically, basically the way that it balances is they win a lot on one side and they'll get great odds, and they'll still get good odds on the other side, but they typically lose a lot there. And the thing that kind of separates them from a lot of other horses is that I think because of the way the profile is designed for the horse, they're very similar in profile to other horses, which means that if you end up in a race with a stronger spike horse, then it will push your odds, to the moon, basically, or depending on how strong your horse is. But like typically, it'll spike your horse quite a bit. But we are going to move on to going through the updates a little bit more.
Yep.
And we'll circle back to kind of race profiles.
So the next section, we've talked about the volume of races. What I think one of the more controversial sections, which a lot of people are supportive of, is elimination of cues. This is interesting to me because I think depending on who you talk to, different people have different opinions on how long cues should be. Personally, I believe that cue length is sort of a de facto fatigue measure. So if you've got 2 or 3 hour cues, 4-hour cues. It limits the number of races that each horse can run and spreads the competition a little more. Obviously, none of us want to see, the 14, 16, 20-hour cues that we had. But on the flip side, depending on if fatigue is implemented with this cue change or not, my concern is if it's staggered, there's going to be a period of time when the best horses can literally enter every race, which is not good for anybody. So I think those are the two balancing viewpoints of, letting people race enough to be profitable with their racers, with not having the best horses in every race. So CJ, what do you think, or what do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, that sums it up pretty well in terms of like the race lengths. That's right. A lot of people that are racing right now, because I do think that there's like a pretty decent influx of users once breeding did open, because horses became more available. I think that, a lot of people didn't get to see what the racing environment was like before breeding opened again. It was pretty, or I guess it would be the last drop, because it went from like the last drop to breeding being open and so on. But the fields were tough. Like, it was really, really tough to have a profitable racer, because you had the best horses in each class running in a lot of the races. And the thing is, like, they introduced higher pot races to try and, incentivize racing against more difficult opponents. But because of the way the pot distribution works, it doesn't make sense for them, because you're looking at a much lower chance of winning, because even if your horse is great, running against another really great horse, you don't have the higher odds of winning that you do if you're facing, a bunch of, kind of peasant horses that you can stomp, right? So I think in terms of looking at it just that way, shorter cues are bad for the game. But I do believe if you kind of scroll down, their intention is to release fatigue at the same time as eliminating the cues. And to me, that is perfect, because I think what a lot of people talk about is like, what if I want to queue up against my friend and we want to watch a race? Or what if we want to do a stream and we want to like have a specific race that we want to show on the stream, or all these different things. I think it makes, quote unquote grudge matches a lot easier to implement. I think it makes it easier for, viewing parties on specific horses and having fun. There's just, the other thing too is like people are saying is like, you don't want to queue up a horse to race and then, go to sleep, wake up, have 2 meals, come back and like, oh, there's my race now. It's one of those things that a short queue time is ideal, as long as fatigue is implemented correctly, so that you don't have monster horses in every race, because monster horses in every race is just bad for everyone. It's not good for the monster horses, because eventually what it ends up kind of doing is forcing them to run against the horses they're trying to avoid from higher pots anyway, because those are the only horses running. And it pushes the larger user base out of being able to race competitively. So fatigue is really important in this respect. And I also, at first I was kind of annoyed with them trying to, or them changing it to only being able to enter one race at a time. But I think it's going to, one, make it easier to manage horses in general. Two, I think it's going to make it easier on managing fatigue, right? Because I don't know if there was any kind of like correlation between them changing that and them implementing fatigue, because, maybe it's something that they have to do in order for the fatigue factor to work properly, unless the fatigue was just going to happen depending on the order of the races and how they pop off. But having the fatigue implemented plus only doing one race at a time is going to be really good for the game, I think. Personally, I don't really like the idea of a bar that has its own attribute that's different for every horse. And, it affords from a technical perspective, I think it affords a different level of skill being able to manage a horse's fatigue, and it's great. But from the perspective that you'll end up with some horses that are monster horses that also have great fatigue, which would just mean that those horses are just going to destroy the fields all the time.
Even more. Yeah.
What I liked the idea of was kind of like a uniform, if everybody got
down
between 9 to 15 races a day, I think that would be more than enough, maybe even on the high side at a certain point. But I mean, I think overall it's going to be good. I think, one, it's going to force people to race more horses. Two, I think it's going to end up with a lot of upsets, right? Like, I think that until people fully understand the fatigue system, you're going to get a lot of these really strong horses that will just go into a race anyway, thinking, this field is weak. And then, you run into a horse that's like maybe decently strong, but full fatigue, like full endurance or whatever you want to call it. And then they pull out a win. And I think that's exciting for a lot of people. So I think it's great. I think the whole change to the racing system, eliminating the cues, adding fatigue, making it only one race at a time, I think those are all good steps moving forward.
We've talked a little bit about it in the past, that an hour and a half to 2 hour cooldown feels about right. And that translates, if you're not running horses 24 hours a day, that usually translates to 25 to 30 races a day, which if you're, I don't think that's going to happen anymore with these changes. It could, but I'd like to see fatigue balanced to, land in about that range. So, 5 to 10%, Fogel, again, we don't know anything, right? We're just kind of guessing. We're kind of thinking about what might make sense, what could work. 5 to 10% to me makes sense. You have some sort of, call it 2 hour cool down on that. And so if you want to run full endurance, all out kind of top ability, you're running kind of 10 to 12 times a day. If you want to take your shot against, some weaker fields or take a little more of a gamble, then you're going to scale up from there. I think that, CJ, threads the needle between what you were saying and kind of how I'm thinking about it. But I don't want to mischaracterize what you were saying about kind of a max number of races a day or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's again, I think, the way that they're going to implement it now is fine. I would have been fine with max races. And like you said before, I thought that the queue, when it was between say 2 and 3 hours, was kind of a good spot to be able to run your horse a lot, but also be able to avoid monster fields. Now, I didn't really when I was discussing that, and when we were discussing that, I wasn't really accounting for the fact that we were going to get basically 4 breeding sessions in a row, and that would allow for probably a higher number of monster horses to be bred than what we maybe originally would have expected. And not just monster horses, but also a large number of just very good horses.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of changed my view in terms of maybe before the drop plus 4 breeding sessions, 2 to 3 hours would have been good. I think we were probably bordering more on the 3 to 4 hours would have been better at this point. But now I think that this is probably a better solution overall anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's see. What else do we have here? Majority of the respondents felt the race horses should not be able to race continuously. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think we kind of covered everything there. We just, in the end, we don't really know a lot, right? Anything that we're talking about here is just a guess. Just kind of what we hope to see. And it sounds like they are taking, community feedback into account, which they tend to do.
And I don't think they get enough credit for that, to be honest. I think when you go into ZED General, you see a lot of complaining most of the time. This time I was actually pretty impressed. A lot of it was more like informational in terms of people were just asking a lot of questions. There were still a lot of complaints, but I think largely, because of the, I would say catastrophic nature of some of the mess ups that have happened in the last 2 months, people overlook the fact that largely those mistakes were made trying to implement something that they were doing because the community asked for it. So one thing that I think, that ZED as a team should probably get more credit for is, yes, sometimes their communication is lacking. Sometimes, their implementation needs to be QC'd more. But overall, they want to create the best experience possible for the users, and they often listen to community feedback. They often try to implement things that will improve the experience for the community. So I think that they deserve credit for that, because a lot of these things in this update are things that the community has been asking for a long time. A lot of the changes they tried to make, it's going on East Coast. A lot of the changes that they tried to make for the drops and for breeding and so on, those are all things that they were working towards the community goals, right? So I think that they deserve credit for that. Now, obviously, they also deserve constructive criticism when it doesn't go right. And I think that there's a line there that a lot of people tend to cross. So I just wanted to say, like, I do think that ZED deserves credit because they do often listen to the community.
I appreciate that, East Coast. Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's a lot of criticism and not a lot of credit. I think, breeding has gone relatively well. And these changes, if they're implemented correctly, should be great. Outside of maybe the one that we'll talk about after this one. So classes and ratings. So the first sentence talks a little bit about what we were talking about earlier. Some people call it sandbagging. I hate that word. And to the point that we were trying to make earlier, when you try to quote unquote sandbag and go into higher class races or worse odds, you're more likely to finish in the middle. But to that point, you'll no longer lose points if you're trying to go up in class to move down in class, which I don't have much of a problem with, but I don't necessarily think that's the issue with the class system right now. So we can get more into that. And then, let's see, this has led to instances. Yep.
Yeah, I'll say
forward, finishing in the bottom spots of higher classes will not affect a racehorse's rating. So all of this is kind of related to that. I think the focus is a little bit in the wrong place, but I generally get what they're trying to do. CJ, what do you think?
Yeah, so with this, I mean, I think that, like you're saying, I think the concern is misplaced from a lot of people, where they say, I don't like people sandbagging up higher classes to try and stay in lower classes. And I think largely it's more of an inconvenience to those horses than it is going to stop any of that, because the reality is, as we discussed before, you need low odds even in your down distances in order to finish in last place anyway. So usually it's only really strong horses that kind of can race in class 2 and 1 already that benefit from that. And the other thing too is what this will do is, I do think it will slow it down a little bit because it limits the race selection, right? And I think that is kind of a big issue for a lot of horses, because what you'll have is, and I'm not going to call out any specific horses, but you'll have a horse that maybe is in class 4 or 5 that's capable of competing in class 1. So then what you end up having is basically it will run all of its up distances in class 5 because the fields are extremely easy to beat, but then it'll run all of its down distances basically anywhere across that spectrum because they have the entire class system to choose from. So I do think in that sense, this will be a deterrent to some of those strategies, because you're going to have to be a lot more focused on your race selection, and you have a lot fewer races to choose from in terms of downgrading, right? So it might kind of end up flipping it the other way, where most of those horses will end up running their they'll have to run their down distances in like a lower class, and then they might run more up distances outside of that class. It's hard to say, but I do think in that sense it's going to be a good deterrent. I do think, like you said, it's kind of misplacing the issue, because I think the biggest issue that people have is that these U horses exist at all, and that a horse that's strong enough to run in class like 2 or 3 is capable of forcing itself down to class 5 and then just kind of dominating the horses there. That's not something that's going to really be addressed by this. And I think like a lot of people were saying, oh, U horses are done for and so on. I don't think any of these changes really affect U horses in general, aside from this one. And the only reason it affects them is just makes it more difficult for them to select the races that they need to use. So it might slow them down a little bit, but I don't think it really hurts them that much.
It won't slow them down any more than cues being 20 hours long.
Yeah, exactly. And fatigue, right? So
yeah. So I like the idea. It's been floated a few times that you're not able to enter races more than one class above your current class.
Right.
I think that would encourage U-shaped horses that sit in class 4 and class 5 and selectively race bigger buy-in races in higher classes, to move up to higher classes to still have access to those buy-ins. I think you would see class 3 and class 4 get a lot tougher. But I think racing your best distances or your quote unquote worst distances one class higher, that's not kind of too far outside of real life. Like horses stretch. Horses will jump up in class all the time to kind of test themselves. And so, yeah, you can still do that at your best distances and not be penalized for it. But, I think part of managing a horse is picking the best races for it. And I'm worried again that this just kind of penalizes or discourages the wrong thing. So I think we're on the same page there. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the fatigue factor and not being able to lose class points?
So the one thing that interests me about that is seeing how it works in practice. So something that I can't remember who it was I was even talking about with it, because it all happened this morning, and I was getting like tagged by a whole bunch of different people about different things that were said in the update. But the question was, oh, you know what? I think it was Icicles actually. If fatigue would either make your horse worse in terms of odds, or if it just meant that it would finish worse. Because if you end up finishing lower because you have lower fatigue in terms of finishing position, that's very different from actually becoming a worse horse, right? Or having a lower strength, because having a lower strength usually pumps up your odds, and that will usually make you finish somewhere in the middle range. Whereas if they're saying that you can't lose points if you're too low of fatigue, I'm wondering if that means that the fatigue is basically going to force your horse into like a lower finishing position. Like my assumption would be that it just makes it weaker, and thus would have more likely to finish in a middle distance. But it is interesting that they added that as a mechanic.
Right. Yeah, I don't really know what to think. I mean, again, fatigue is kind of this nebulous, abstract thing. Like we know generally what it should be, but who knows how it's actually going to be implemented. So
we'll see.
There was a reference to speed in the comments about fatigue. And again, to your point, I think that more means that, if a horse is losing relative speed, then it's just going to affect the finishing position and push it toward the middle. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And what I had said, because that was what I woke up to this morning, was people tagging me on Twitter about that speed comment. So I just basically said, to me, this is just more referencing, like when they say speed, I don't think they necessarily are talking about like actual speed and race times. They're talking about like the strength of a horse. And as like that's the way that BG looks at it, and I really like his take on it. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's kind of like a different discussion altogether. In terms of removing odds, I think we saw a lot of discussion about this where people were pretty unhappy with the new flames, and they're really unhappy with losing really unhappy with losing odds, and they don't like this new flame system. And I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, mm-hmm. where I don't have a problem with it. Sup, Donkey? I don't have a problem with it, because to me, what this does, and we talked about this earlier, I just think it makes the discovery process more difficult. But because we have historical odds and we do have access to all of that data, it's not really that hard to piece together how strong your horse is relative to other horses. What this does is it really places emphasis on the importance of race analysis, knowing the fields that you're running in, knowing which horses are strong in which class and at which distance, and then being able to compare your horse to them in a relative sense. So, like if you're pulling flames against a horse like Princess of Power in class 1, that's probably a pretty good thing. Your horse is pretty strong, right? If not, you have to run against other horses and figure it out. And I think that's a big part of it, right? Like, I know that Poseidon from the beginning, or maybe not from the beginning, but from when I joined, mm-hmm. He always said that he thought that odds should be removed because it basically encourages people to run a horse once or like 5 times and then give up on it, right? And I think that there has to be a balance of discovery where you don't want someone racing 1,000 times to find out if his horse is actually strong or if it's just getting good RNG, because that's just a money sink and a money grab. But at the same time, you don't want it to be like, wow, I got a new horse, I'm so pumped for this. I race it once, and it's like, it's a donkey, I don't want to run it anymore. There has to be some level of discovery, and I agree with that. And I agree with what T-Sizzle is saying about people that put in the work are going to be rewarded for it. You put in the time to do your analysis, you put in the time to learn about your horse in the fields and the relativity, and you will you'll be pretty successful, I think.
But I still think we were talking about this at the very beginning of the stream before most of you guys joined. I still think within 10, 15, 20 races, if it's just $2.50 races, we're talking about, call it $40 to $50. If you place in a couple of those races, you're talking about less than that. So you can buy a $200 horse, spend $40 or $50 racing it, and have a pretty good idea of how it compares to some of the historical horses pretty quickly still, right? If you pull no flames in any of your races, and you have races where you can go back and look at horses that have raced 100 times and you can look at their odds, you'll still start to kind of be able to form comparisons pretty quickly. And so in my mind, again, the other thing we were talking about is if these flames represent, which it sounds like they do, if these flames represent the three most likely horses that are considered to finish 1, 2, and 3, then those will likely be some of the best odds horses, unless you have opposite distance spikers that are pulling better odds. Oh yeah, Mr. Irish Cream. That's exactly right. I mean, it's.
And you should already, honestly, like,
yeah.
This is one of the biggest things, and like, people not knowing their horses is where people are hurting themselves the most, right? Like, you should know exactly where your horse should be able to race, who it shouldn't be able to beat, or who it will be able to beat. The best way to maximize, your racing ability with any horse is to know it inside out, and not just that horse, but all of the best horses that it has to run against in order to be successful. I think that, people are really just kind of getting to the tip of the iceberg with race analysis and underlying metrics and all that stuff that's going to make, racing, it's going to really make racing easier for a lot of people. And until a lot of those tools are developed, though, it's really on the owner of the horse to put in the work, put in your due diligence. I'm not saying you have to pore over every race in the ecosystem 24 hours a day like I do. But I think that, it's going to be really hard to say exactly what the flame represents in terms of specific odds. But that's a good representation. Like, we don't know exactly how it is for odds, because like, if you, like, for example, if you get a race where you have every monster in that distance in that class together, sometimes there is no horse that's below 10 odds, right? So that does happen. It's rare.
But most races you have, a 6, 7, 8, you have another 8, 9, and then you have a 8, 9, 10. And you generally have kind of that balance. And in my mind, if you're talking about the three most likely horses to win, and we've talked about, the odds distribution and the best odds are more likely to win, that's how I read this, is these flames represent that. And rather than having odds for every horse, and racing a horse 5 times or 3 times, and racing a horse 5 times or 3 times and seeing that it pulls 46 odds in every race. It's like, well, that one needs to go on the shelf until we get mud or curly Q tracks in the game. Now I think it's 10 races you'll start to get an idea. And 15 to 20 races, especially if you're reaching into some $5, some different classes. You're keeping an eye on placements. I think that's right. T-Sizzle, you say 25, 30. Yeah, I mean, I think 25, 30 at most, especially to see CJ, you're holding at 5.
No, I'm just saying. I was just going to kind of cut in and say that it really depends on, one, on the horse, and 2, on, I think, the can we call ourselves equestrians? I don't know what we'd say, but the owner.
Trainers. We're trainers.
Yeah, let's say trainers. So trainers. When you're talking about how long it takes you to evaluate a horse or get a good feel for it, some horses are much easier to get a good feel for because their preferred distances are very prominent and easy to find. For example, spiker horses, very easy to learn. More the discovery phase is in finding which horses it's stronger than and which ones it's not. And that can take some time, but you can also drastically reduce the time by knowing what the hierarchy is in the spiking, distance. The other thing is basically as a trainer or owner or whatever, the more familiar you are with the fields, the more familiar you are with kind of the, David and I kind of differ on this a little bit, but In my opinion, the more familiar you are with the general profiles of horses, I think the fewer races it will take you to kind of figure out where you should be running it and how. Again, there's always going to be variance from horses. Some horses don't follow a general profile and they have like really weird distances. Sometimes you just kind of get unlucky with your fields and don't run into a horse you're familiar with right away. But especially with odds, once you're really, really comfortable with the game, in my opinion, it does not take long for you to figure out exactly what you've got. So I think that, 25 to 50 initially is probably a pretty good starting point. And again, some horses take longer than others to figure out, because if you add variance into it, some horses like will just win even on their down distances a bunch of times and kind of give you the wrong impression of what their best distance is or what their best distance isn't.
I think we have a question about speed.
I think maybe we should. How do I feel about speed? I have a horse that has poor odds but good speed. It places consistently but does not win. So the way that we feel about speed in this stream is that your speed metrics are derived, your speed and your time are derived from your results. So you are finishing in the middle more because you have high odds. And so your average speed, and here's the thing is that if you have high variance, you might still have the same average speed because you're still going from really, really fast to really, really slow. So the average speed might not change very much. But if you're tightening your variance and you're not running super high speeds, but you're also not running super low speeds, you're going to finish in the middle more, but you still might have a high average speed because the actual block isn't moving much, but your positioning changes a lot. And your positioning will always change depending on the competition that you're going against. I brought up this statistic earlier today. Everybody knows that the Crimson Chin is the best sprinter in the game. Well, my new sprinter has a faster average speed than the Crimson Chin. I also know that my horse has no chance of beating the Crimson Chin in a sprint. So, that shouldn't really be possible. Again, it's more of a, it's not a huge sample size, but there's a lot of indications on our side that we believe in statistically that point to speed and time not really being derived from the horse itself and more being something generated as part of the race results. Again, that's our theory. A lot of people do believe in speed. For me, I think speed in its current state is kind of a lot of extra information that doesn't really provide more value, because by the time you have enough results to look at a speed of look at the speed of a horse and with any kind of certainty, you already have a huge placement chart for them that kind of shows you where they're strong and where they're not. So I just, and the thing is you can't, and I mentioned this before on the Pony Plug stream, you can't run your horse outside of actual paid races or free races against real competition. So it's not like you can measure the speed of a horse on a fake track against, timers or whatever. You're getting the results already. So, you should already have that information for the most part. That's just kind of the way that I look at it. I wouldn't worry too much about speed personally. Some people think it's really important, and reach out to guys like Kirk, reach out to guys like Give a Hoot, and I think the guys who own Wildcatter, I don't know. T-Chad, reach out to T-Chad. Those guys really like speed, and they can probably explain a little bit better why they like speed. Our stance on it is that we don't think it's deterministic, and we don't find it adds a lot of value to track. But everybody has different views, and I think that's part of what makes this game a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think to just quickly add on there, and then kind of pivot again. Variance has some value, but the point that CJ was making before is by the time you have enough race data, even if it's 20 races at a certain distance, to look at variance, the placements over those 20 races will tell you just as much as the variance will, or more. Because generally, if you have higher variance, you're going to have a higher likelihood of finishing first or last. So I think that's our stance. I'm sure, especially based on the conversation we had with a lot of the guys on Pony Plug. What was it, a couple weeks ago, CJ? And we encourage you guys that haven't watched that to go check out that stream. I'm not sure exactly what they're calling it, but there was a stream where speed was covered in detail, and there, CJ and I gave a lot of our opinions. It's not so much drama as just healthy debate. People can look at the same data and the same numbers and have different opinions, and have different factors driving those opinions. And I think, we have the things that we look at and how we kind of see the game, and other people that have great horses, look at different things, and we all can have winning horses at different levels. So, Ice, we talked a little bit about the fatigue earlier and the speed. Really until we know how fatigue is going to be implemented, we can't really guess. I mean, I think CJ and my guess was that it was going to push, tighten the range, or push horses that would usually win back toward the middle. But who knows?
Listen, Ice, just go and watch the stream later.
Yeah, exactly. So just as a time check, we're about an hour in. I know we do have some people watching that are interested in kind of watching the stream. We have other people that are interested in the giveaway. We are going to kind of finish up these last couple sections, and then we're going to do a deep dive
through them quickly.
We're going to do a deep dive into the horse. So, don't worry. We're not going to keep you here another hour going through some of this stuff. We're going to switch it up pretty soon. So new racing events. I like this change. The one concern I have is it makes it a lot harder to value horses, bad horses. Horses that never win, facing off against each other might have some value. I mean, if you look at the image here, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to blow it up, but we can try. There we go. So if you look at this image here, this is a 0% win, $10 race, right? I mean, that's,
but the problem is
who's never won before is it's almost a maiden special weight. Oh, there we go. Did we get rated?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
but I think what we
really appreciate the raid, guys.
Thanks, Lucy. I think more to that point though is that I don't think it's a big deal, because you're basically looking at it in the sense that unless you're a horse that never wins but always gets second or third in one of those 0% races, as soon as you win one of them, then you're back into the rest of the field, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that that's going to offset a lot of losses, but I do think it'll give an opportunity for someone to get really excited about a race that they could potentially win with a bad horse.
But even 5% winners have some value, right? Because you're if you think of 5 wins over 100 races, you're still going to be somewhat minus EV. But if you can lose 10 races and then win a race and kind of stay in that 5% range, you're not going to be losing nearly as much money with those type of racers. So it's just, I think it's an interesting thing.
I think that's good though.
Probably
right?
won't add a lot of incremental value, but it will encourage people to race some of their donkeys, right? And so that's good to keep fields healthy, good to keep more horses racing, good to keep people learning how to evaluate horses. So what were you going to say though?
No, that's what I was that's what I was agreeing on, is just that, giving an avenue for people to use horses that are not necessarily super strong. And not only that, but I think like, some of these horses that could be stronger in different fields will have a place. And I think that they're going to continue to expand on this. Like, I know that from talking to the ZED team, I think that their overall goal is to make sure that every, or at least most horses have a place in the game, right? And right now we're not nearly at that state where I think like probably 90% of horses don't have a place in the game. So I think this is a good step in that direction. I don't really have a problem with it at all.
Yeah, I realize we still have this comment from a while ago highlighted. So I think the other thing, Doofy has always said, and people that are involved with real life horse racing definitely have this opinion more strongly than a lot of others. But Doofy has said that there on the flip side of that, there have to be horses that aren't going to win, that aren't going to be winners.
Absolutely.
That
I think those will still exist though, right? Even with that 0% thing.
But I do think that more horses, I think we agree that more horses racing more will help with discovery of all the horses throughout the ecosystem. So whether it's, whether it's for racing purposes, whether it's for breeding purposes, whether it's kind of, understanding a wide variety of things. So more information is generally almost always good, as long as the information isn't, twisted or flawed in some way. Having more data on more horses is good for the game. So,
yep, I agree.
And then the last piece is leaderboards and a new rating system, which before we move to that, burn the glue. I think there's some argument for being able to burn bred horses. I don't think Genesis horses should ever be able to be burned. There's some argument to not being able to burn legendary horses either, regardless of how good or bad they are. But I think that has to be under consideration, that you get some small amount of value back. I think it's a good idea. I think there would have to be a lot more work done to figure out what that looks like in the ecosystem. Some sort of cooldown on burning or something like that. You can't just breed 100 horses and then burn the 95 bad ones. CJ, what do you think? Do you have any strong opinions there?
I don't really. I thought about, when I first joined, my initial kind of idea for that, because it is a game and it's not real life, because I think this doesn't really make a lot of sense. Hey, Lucky, in terms of like, looking at real horses. But if you were to say, take 10 glue horses, jumble them up into, some kind of burning mechanism that gives you, say, like the highest level of cross with like randomized stats from the horses that you throw in. I thought that was kind of like a cool idea, but that's more of like a very, I think that maybe gets away a little bit from the spirit of what ZED Run is meant to represent.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do we need to burn horses? I mean, maybe a mechanic that does allow you to burn them just to kind of like not kind of like flood stables or whatever, would probably be a good idea to burn for Des. I think the only issue I have with that is that, like,
that'll benefit larger stables.
You're going to be able to get these stables that can pump out, hundreds of foals a month, that have no intention, that'll just like race them. And if they don't find like a great racer, they'll just burn it for Des. And like, they'll just continue to do that over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like a rich get richer kind of situation, in my opinion, unless you put a limit on it. And if you put a limit on it, then it kind of discourages the burning process, right? So if you're doing the burning as a mechanic to kind of like just clear up space, I'm cool with that. Maybe it gives you like, maybe instead of Des, you could burn a certain number of horses for free race entries, like a token that will give you a free entry into a $2.50 race or something. So then you're not, like, obviously it's an investment to breed a horse, so maybe you're getting like a little bit of that investment back by burning it. I could see something like that happening, because then not only are you getting a tiny bit of investment back, but you're also giving yourself the potential to win some money, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot to
yes, that is one thing I do like about burning, is that you might be able to make available some really good names. Like, for example, I have a ghost white supercoat that I named North Spirit, that I'm holding on to, but I was kind of disappointed because she ended up being a really bad racer, and I love racing. Like, maybe she's a good breeder, who knows? But I love racing, and usually I just offload anything that can't race almost immediately. So yeah, being able to get names back or have some kind of renaming mechanism. That's something that I also floated to the ZED team before, is like having some way of doing a one-time name burn so that you can rename a horse. Because I have had a few horses that I really liked on the track that I was not really happy with their name because somebody else had named them. And I actually ended up selling them strictly because of that. Yeah, I literally took a loss immediately on that horse because I was like, I thought I would be able to look past the name of it, because it was a pretty good racer, but it bothered me too much. But again, I'm kind of maybe the exception, where I really highly value names and coat colors. Not everybody does. Yeah. And I don't know why some people name horses the way that they do.
You and me both. So flipping through this last section, I know we've been kind of teased about a leaderboard for a while. I like to see that it's still kind of top of mind. That's interesting, Aquila, about reusing names. That must have been pretty early. Definitely not this year. But yeah, so the leaderboards, I think are interesting. I'm excited to kind of see, what they may look like. I mean, obviously here you've got kind of a ZED stable leaderboard, which is pretty interesting. Kind of similar to the Twitter posts with the dashboard of best stables and best horses, talking about total earnings and total places and number of races. That's a heck of a lot of races. But the one that I'm most interested in is the individual horse ranking with this new ZED rank. Because I know some tools, some sites have tried ELO rankings before. There have been various issues with those, but there have also been a lot of positives. So it'll be interesting to see how they solve kind of the cold start problem, not really being able to rank a horse well in its first 10 or 20 races, if that's possible to solve. but I'm glad to see that this is still a priority, and what looks like it'll be, it's in the works. So, CJ, what do you think?
Yeah, even though I think that a lot of the ranking sites are kind of deeply flawed, I did have a good conversation with BG today about ELO and how it can be really useful. The problem with ELO is that it can't account for U horses. And that becomes kind of a big issue because especially U horses that D-class in lower fields will lose a lot against bad horses, right? So losing against bad horses gives you, or takes more points away than winning against bad horses. Or, I mean, I guess it depends on how they weight it, but there's no real way of accounting for that right now that I'm aware of. Because, a horse like Vanilla Bean, who we know is probably, well, in my opinion, Vanilla Bean's like a top 5 horse in the game, not because of its like natural strength, but because of its ability to
run at every
do class selection. But it will never end up very high on the ELO rankings because it loses more than it wins, right? So, or at least I believe it does, or at least very close to it. So it'll be a good measure. The problem I have with that is that it's basically going to look like the class system, and there's a very high correlation between high ELO and high class. So I think it'll be good for like a visual representation of which horses are high in class, that are really strong in general, that win a lot more than they lose. But in terms of the actual measure of the best horses in the game, at least in its current state, I still think that the most profitable horses are the best horses. And typically the most profitable horses don't run in the top 2 classes unless they are like the very best horses at that distance.
I think the one counterpoint to that is, at least one of the ELO systems had Vanilla Bean as the top horse for a while. Before it was, I don't think it's being updated anymore. And Steph Curry, to name a couple specific horses, was in the top 20 for certain distances. So,
did they have like an explanation for how they were deriving their ELO system? Because I know that like by just like going from like by a regular ELO system, it would penalize U horses for sure.
I don't remember. I didn't dig in. I'm talking about painted ponies for those who have been around for a little while and used to use the site. I don't think it's been updated.
I'll probably reach out to him and just ask
for a couple months.
I would like to see if there's any kind of like manual adjustment that was going on, or if he had some way of accounting for. I just don't know how you would account for it without like really damaging the kind of like the formula for the ELO in the first place.
I don't necessarily think it penalized for losing. I think that you had to win against good competition in order to get positive points at certain distances. So if you were really strong in certain distances and won a lot of races, then you pretty quickly got up in rankings. So
no, actually, that makes sense. If you just eliminate losing and only account for wins in ELO, then that could work actually. I didn't really think that through, but anyway, the ranking is going to be fun.
So I think that kind of covers everything we plan to cover on the announcements. I think we've gone through some questions. Jackpots, appreciate you linking that article. We'll definitely have to take a look at that.
We'll put that aside. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think, CJ, did you have anything else you wanted to kind of say, or any strong opinions, or do you want to jump into this horse?
Not specifically. I think just in summary for like some of the people that were not here initially when we were going through some of the bigger changes to like odds and fatigue and stuff like that, is just that my personal belief is that, it's moving in the right direction. I don't think that it's a bad thing to take away odds because, well, at least in terms of like having historical odds as a reference point, you'll be able to kind of reverse engineer the strength of your horses that are new just by knowing the field. And I think that it puts a heavy emphasis on analysis and putting the work in to really understand your horse and understand the fields that you're running against. I think that fatigue is going to be good as well, especially since now they're going to be taking away the queue times and they're implementing fatigue at the same time. So, so having that in place will allow for fields to be a little bit more open, I think, and it adds like a little bit more gamesmanship to the game as well. Or sorry, gamesmanship probably not the right word, but a little bit more skill in terms of managing your horse properly, when to run it at half fatigue, who you're running against, being able to tell. And here's the thing too, is that like if you're, maybe this is giving a little bit more away than what I had intended in this stream, but if you know the field that you're running against and you know the really strong horses that give your horse a hard time, you can keep tabs on those horses for when they're in races and when they've run and how their fatigue bar most likely looks by their results and how often they're running, right? So so I think that take it easy too, Sizzle. In that sense, it just adds another layer of analysis to racing, which I think is a good thing because it makes it more difficult, and it makes it so that the more work that you're putting in and the better you're able to interpret the data, the more successful you're going to be. And I think it does that without really hurting like the more casual user, because I think that they were not paying attention to a lot of those things anyway.
Right. No, I agree.
But I think now what we're planning to do is so anyone that wasn't here before, we are doing a horse giveaway to an empty stable. And by empty, I don't mean like someone that's been flipping horses. I mean an empty stable, as in someone that wants to get into Zed, is really interested in what it represents and how it works, and just hasn't been able to dip their feet in yet and wants to get their hands on a horse to race and understand how it works. The horse that we're giving away is called Obsidian Thunder. This is a horse that I bred from, I guess you could call it my top breeder. Yeah, I would love to with David at some point, but I'll get back to you on that. The horse is Treasure of the Love is kind of my best breeder. She has, I think, 4 out of 5 horses with sub 10 odds in class 5, right? They're not all super profitable because they're not run super well, but both Thunder Love and Diamond Smoke together sold for about 1.7 ETH. But anyway, more to the point, Obsidian Thunder is, I think, a pretty good starter horse because while there's no like illusion of it being a world beater in any sense, it is capable of pulling sub 10 odds in class 5. It's a pretty consistent runner across different distances. It's a good horse for discovery in that sense because we've run it a little bit so that we can run an analysis, but it's not kind of like at peak performance yet. So that does give the new user a chance to kind of discover how to race a horse, how to find its best distance, how to like class up and class down, that sort of thing. And part of that is going to be we're going to make ourselves available to this person and kind of help them out in doing that discovery. If they want the help, if they want to just try and do it themselves, that's great too. We can just provide the tools that they need. So yeah, and yeah, like Irish Cream is saying, I mean, I did kind of waffle back and forth with this being the horse that we were going to give away because it is a really nice color and I do really like the name. But I also think that like if we're going to be giving away horses to new users, I don't want to just like give them straight glue and like tell them to go and throw money at the game and lose a bunch of races, right? So I do think this could be like a between 8 and 10% winner. I think its expected win rate right now is 9%, something like that. Do
you want to share your?
Yeah. So maybe I'll do that. Hold on. I'm gonna go with this one. Okay. So if you see here, this is the horse. You can see right now it's got it's negative ROI. Its average odds are 11.36, which is not great. It's not terrible. But you can see here, sometimes it pulls 10, pulls 9.9, 8.27 here. So again, this is not a horse that you're going to take and go and win a ton of races with, but it's going to give you a good idea of how to manage a horse. It'll give you a chance. Usually, I think isn't the 10% win rate? It's at like 10.5 odds, something like that.
Yeah, 10.5 to 11, somewhere in that range. Is
okay, so if you can run, he's got like 10.5 odds in, it looks like maybe half of his races or very close to it. So, I mean, again, it's a horse that you should be able to have a little fun with, that won't, hopefully lose you a ton of money running it. It has a nice coat. If you believe in the bloodline thing, it has links to My Best Breeder. I think for a starter horse, you could do a lot worse. But in terms of how to get it, we are just, so I mentioned this at the beginning of the stream. If you're a new stable, or if you're really interested in Zed, we're big community guys. We believe in people that are going to be like active in the community, that will pay forward like anything that they learn, help other new users, really kind of immerse themselves in Zed. So I just asked any like new people to the game that are interested in winning the horse, just reach out to me either on Twitter or on Discord. I posted those before, but I'll post them again. My Discord is here, and my Twitter is, sorry, I should have these on hand. So just reach out to me, send me a message, and all I want you to do is just tell me why you're interested in Zed, what you plan to accomplish, and I'm just going to pick someone kind of randomly from those people that do reach out. The reason why we're kind of doing this is just, I don't want to just give this horse away randomly to someone that might turn around and flip it, or that might not just be that interested in the game. Not that it's a super valuable horse, but it's still something that I would rather have end up with someone who really is interested in learning about Zed and trying to immerse themselves in it. So in that sense, I think, putting in that little extra effort, rather than just like throwing in a random number generator, to shoot me a message and just explain, what about Zed interests you, is not too much to ask. Yeah, I mean, again, when I say new stable, I definitely would prefer to give it to someone that's just entering the game. But like, if you don't really have a racer, I could see like why you would be interested, and I'm not opposed to giving it away if I think that you're probably like maybe the best candidate for it. So I mean,
it's a soft 0 or 1, right, CJ? I mean, if you have one or two horses, you're clearly in kind of a newer stable. I mean, that's kind of who this is intended for. I think it would help if you do have a stable, sending that in the message as well, CJ. I think that would kind of help you take a look and
link me to your stable. Tell me about how you've, so I guess your journey so far in Zed, so to speak. And here's the thing too, is that we're not trying to do this as a one-off. I think our goal was always kind of to get to a point where we could give away bred horses fairly regularly to new players, or people that didn't really have their own way of acquiring them, or were hesitant to because they're not sure how much they would like the game themselves. And it is one of those things that you kind of have to experience to really see if it's something that you're going to enjoy or not. I know that we have a few people that have lined up and said that they really like the initiative and that they're willing to donate horses monthly or every once in a while, fairly low legendary bred horses. Some of them were like, hey, I'm going to give you an unraced horse to give away on your stream. And I was like, we don't do unraced horses on our stream. Get the hell out of here. And that's just a joke because I think that I'm not a fan of unraced horses, but I think like a lot of other people are. And I do think that there is some value in that experience of the gamble of going from race to unrace and not really knowing what you have. So I do think that could be fun. But the main thing is just that we do have other people lining up that are willing to donate horses to the stream to get into the hands of new players. And what we really want to focus on is introducing new players to the game, educating them on how to run, and yeah, I mean, making ourselves available as resources in the community. I think David and I are both on the same page in that we would like to. I don't think that we're gonna hold anyone's hand through racing processes, because I get those questions a lot. I get a lot of DMs during the day where people are like, hey, should I be running my horse at this distance or this distance? And I'll be like, I might help them in the short term in terms of like telling them, it looks like your horse is strong here, here, or here, but more longer term, it's kind of like that expression, give a man a fish, should teach a man to fish, right? It's one of those things where it's like, giving someone the resources and teaching them how to interpret them is more valuable than just kind of giving them the answers. So I don't know. I tend to ramble a little bit as the stream goes on. So I'll pass it back over to David.
No, I think that's what this stream is. You kind of said it. That's what this stream is, right? It's meant to be a little more educational. At times we may be a little bit drier than some other streams, but the goal is to really kind of give you guys some knowledge that we've started to accrue as we've kind of worked or played, or however you want to look at it. And also to have a conversation, right? Because everybody can learn from everybody. And so, that's part of this is getting the giveaway tonight is, getting a player with not too many horses that might not have a racer, or a brand new player even, that get them a horse to race a little bit and to learn a little bit. And then, we'll have a variety of other things that we're rolling out. This is our fourth stream, CJ, I think. Third or fourth stream. So
yeah, and the first two we lost
started.
We were kind of dumb and didn't turn on the saving the VOD feature yet.
Yeah.
So this is all just kind of like ground level.
And so we really do want to get this thing rolling. I know we have quite a few people in here watching us. CJ, I don't know. Did you want to talk any more about the giveaway? I know we had a question from Golden Glow Master about how we got into ZED. Is
that for us, or were you talking about the person that gets the horse? I know he said that he was interested in doing like an interview for where was his other post?
Yeah.
Inside ZED. And I think that we'd be interested in something like that. But I think just in kind of like summary for the stream, I think you could show the racing chart that we use. I don't know. Did you pull that up? Or did I think I pulled that up. I think I still have it here.
You have it? Yeah.
The screen that I'm sharing. Is that up now? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what I use to analyze my horses. This is really just mapping placements to kind of show you where you should be running your horse. The average odds on the side are just kind of, that's more of like a visual thing. You kind of understand what the odds are of your horse, but it is kind of nice to be able to see where you get the best odds. And something that we like to talk about, we both agree on, is that odds are not necessarily deterministic of where your horse is going to run best, because every horse has a different distance preference, and you have to kind of discover that as you race your horse. So yeah, I think that these are the kind of tools that we use to analyze our racers. It's simple but effective. I think that there are more robust tools that, like, Genesis developed one that separates by class, and I think also by buy-in. I found that personally for me, that is a lot going on the screen. It gives you probably a more detailed view, but I find that once I have a general overview like this of a horse, I'll go into know your horses to look more deep into each distance and the actual competition that they're facing.
Do you want to pull that up for Obsidian?
Know your horses, yeah. So, sorry. So when you have this, so if I wanted to look at a specific distance, like, you have odds by distance here. So you can see he's getting his best odds from 12 to 1600, which doesn't always indicate that those are his best distances, but gives you a good general idea of where he'll run best. And then you can also filter going by length to either 1200, 1400, 1600, which are the ones that he does best in. Let's do 1400 because those are his lowest. And you see he's got a win and a second place at that distance. Also some middling ones because, again, he's not the strongest horse ever. But I mean, these are pretty decent odds to run with. So typically you would look at this as, say, kind of a quote unquote up distance where you will generally have more favorable finishing positions in terms of finishing in the top three more often, which will push your horse kind of in an upward trajectory in terms of their class points. So then with a horse like this, you don't really want to be running higher than class 5, because if you're getting, these kind of odds in class 5, typically your odds will go up as you go up in class. The difference between 5 and 4 is not actually that big. The jump really is between 4 and 3, where you start seeing major differences in odds and results. So then, all of this is part of the discovery of, where am I finishing in this bottom 3 or bottom 4 area that I can kind of use to make sure that my horse is not going too far up in class if it's not a natural U. So these are all things that, like, you're going to kind of look at. Won't let you message me. Okay. I'll reach out to you. If you drop your Twitter on there, I'll try and reach out to you.
You can whisper. Anyway, you should be able to whisper the channel if you want to try to do that.
Yeah, I'll do that.
No, I'm saying Corpse Orb can whisper.
Oh, right.
Our channel. So.
Okay, I got it.
Keep an eye on that.
But sorry about that. Anyway, I think, I kind of actually need to shut the stream down.
See you, Civil.
Myself. Yeah, see you, Civil. Thanks for stopping in. But if David wanted to stay on and kind of discuss anything else or explain about the horse, I'm looking forward to seeing any messages that people send looking for the horse. And once I do pick someone to give the horse away to, I will shout them out on Twitter, say where the horse is going, and hopefully maybe keep track of it a little bit to try and help you run the horse properly. And again, if you reach out to us, we are always available and more than willing to help with any aspect of ZED.
Absolutely.
And just as a quick mention, David and I kind of went back and forth on this, but next week we may do sometimes we'll do pop-up streams on the weekend, just little things to have a discussion. But our main streams will usually be Wednesday nights. And our next stream, we're going to focus largely on breeding and some of the data that we've derived from the statistics that we had pulled from the API. So I think that is going to be a really interesting discussion. And yeah, if you liked the show, follow us on Twitch, obviously. We are happy to take also constructive criticism. If there's something that you would like to hear about, send us a message. we like to discuss everything Zed. So I don't know, David, if you wanted to add anything.
No, that's exactly right. Really, I don't know if Zook, it looks like Lacey's still around. So guys, appreciate the raid tonight. We didn't say it enough earlier, and really appreciate, most of the people that came over staying with us. So, we'll talk some about breeding next week. And you'll see us pop up here and there, trying to get a few streams in here, but really appreciate, everybody joining us tonight, and look forward to, seeing what these changes bring us, and learning more about ZED together, and teaching people as much as we can. So really appreciate it, everybody. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Have a good night, everybody.